Beneath the earth, beyond maps and memory, lie the remains of a nightmare most were never meant to see. These aren't just bunkers, they're twisted monuments to cruelty, obsession, and madness engineered by the Nazi regime. Hidden from history, sealed by silence, and protected by fear, each one holds a story darker than the last. What secrets were buried, and why do some believe they were never meant to be uncovered? You're about to find out. The Bavarian Alps, with their postcard-perfect peaks and winding forest trails, hide secrets older than most are willing to imagine. Tourists flock to the town of Berchtesgaden for its serene beauty, unaware that beneath their feet lies one of the most disturbing remnants of Nazi Germany, a vast, hidden bunker complex that once served as a command and refuge site for the Third Reich's most notorious figures. This network, partially beneath the Obersalzberg Mountains, was more than just a safe haven. It was a nerve center, a place of whispered orders and untraceable decisions. While the site above ground was bombed by Allied forces in 1945, the deeper levels of the bunker system remained untouched, sealed behind collapsed passages and steel barriers buried by time. In 2023, a privately funded team of urban archaeologists and historians received special access to explore a lower chamber of the system, one that had long been sealed under earth and rock. Using ground-penetrating radar and old Luftwaffe schematics discovered in Soviet archives, the team zeroed in on a passage believed to lead to an area listed on blueprints only as Saal 9, Room 9. Officially, this room had never existed. Breaking through layers of compacted debris, the team entered a narrow concrete tunnel marked by heavy iron doors. Inside, the air was dense and stale, preserved by decades of isolation. The corridor sloped downward, leading to a massive antechamber that opened into multiple wings, storage rooms, command posts, and something far stranger. One room appeared to be a medical bay, but not of the standard variety seen in wartime bunkers. Rusted gurneys were lined up against walls smeared with faded, dark stains. Surgical tools remained organized with eerie precision on trays, untouched by scavengers. But what chilled the team to their core were the leather restraints embedded into the tables, restraints too small for adults. In the corners of the so-called infirmary were personal effects that made stomachs turn: a child's boot, a threadbare stuffed rabbit, and hand-drawn sketches taped to the walls. The drawings, crudely made with charcoal, depicted stick figures surrounded by soldiers, barbed wire, and what looked like syringes. The further they went, the more disquieting the findings became. A separate chamber housed dozens of film reels stacked in sealed metal canisters. Some were labeled in faded ink, Verhalten 128, Behavior 128, Test Group A, and one ominously marked, Verloren. The tapes were brought to light and reviewed later in a secure lab. What they saw was horrifying. The black and white footage revealed children, many emaciated, being subjected to isolation, loud noises, flashing lights, and injections. Their reactions were monitored by stern-faced men in SS uniforms, who took detailed notes on clipboards. A few reels showed attempts at conditioning, including forced recitation of propaganda under physical duress. Others were darker still, footage abruptly ending as children were wheeled away, their fates unknown. These experiments seemed to echo a theory floated by some fringe historians, that parts of the Nazi leadership were obsessed not only with racial purity but with psychological engineering from a young age. Creating children who could be molded into emotionless ideologues or even used in psychic warfare, a notion Heinrich Himmler once scribbled in a private memo. The contents of this bunker, it seemed, lent tragic weight to that theory. Among the documents recovered was a leather-bound ledger containing names, dates, and disturbing remarks. One read, Subject 14, failed to assimilate visual conditioning. Removed from program. Another, underlined 3 times, read, Subject 22, responsive to fear stimuli. Increased dosage. The existence of these records sparked immediate controversy when they were leaked online. Historians demanded verification, while skeptics dismissed the footage as falsified. However, DNA tests conducted on remnants found in the medical room, including strands of hair and preserved tissue samples, confirmed human origin: children under the age of 10. Germany's government, initially silent, later issued a brief statement calling for an international inquiry into unauthorized excavations at Obersalzberg. The site was resealed, and access revoked indefinitely. Members of the exploration team were reportedly placed under a gag order, and one historian publicly distanced himself from the findings, claiming he had been misled about the mission's scope. Unofficially, the story spread fast. Whispers of Room 9 and its nightmarish past began circulating in fringe history circles and conspiracy forums. Some claimed there were additional rooms still buried, with worse horrors inside. Others believed that the tapes were only a fraction of the materials the Nazis had recorded during their psychological experiments. In the years that followed, locals in Berchtesgaden began reporting strange occurrences: power surges near the mountain's base, strange hums at night, and sightings of figures in old military uniforms near the bunker's sealed entrances. Whether hallucination, hoax, or something more, the mountain's presence had grown darker in the public imagination. The mountain that once served as a retreat for Hitler had never truly rested. Beneath its soil, echoes of trauma still stirred. The Black Fortress may have been buried, but its legacy, of cruelty, manipulation, and the abuse of the innocent, remains a wound in the landscape, pulsing quietly in the shadows of history. At the frigid edge of the world lies Alexandra Land, an ice-cloaked island in the Russian Arctic. Its silence is broken only by howling winds and the distant crack of shifting glaciers. In 1943, Nazi Germany established a weather station there, code-named Schatzgräber, treasure hunter. Officially, its purpose was to gather meteorological data for U-boat operations. Unofficially, it became a site of experimentation that blurred the line between science and sadism. The existence of Schatzgräber was confirmed in declassified Soviet reports from the 1960s, which mentioned a failed Nazi outpost where German soldiers were found dead from trichinosis after eating infected polar bear meat. That, it seemed, was the station's grim end. However, in 2016, a Russian military expedition unearthed far more than frozen bunkers and rusted machinery. They discovered a sealed trapdoor beneath a collapsed radio antenna, hidden beneath layers of permafrost. Inside was a stairwell descending into darkness, untouched since the war. Russian historians, joined by Arctic researchers and military engineers, opened the door and stepped into what would be known as Sector Zwei, an undocumented wing of the Schatzgräber facility. The lower bunker was remarkably preserved by the cold. Gas lamps and oxygen tanks sat undisturbed. Wooden desks bore the insignia of the Wehrmacht. But something was off. One wall bore rows of deep claw marks, gouged into concrete. Metal restraints were bolted to the floor in a corner chamber. The team found dozens of animal cages, most twisted or broken, with gnawed bones inside. Fluorescent green moss grew along the walls in places where ice had receded. Then came the corpses. 5 bodies were found stacked near a collapsed corridor, partially mummified by sub-zero temperatures. They wore Nazi uniforms, but with a strange addition: thick rubber gloves and glass visors, similar to those used in chemical labs. One man's skeletal fingers were fused to a scalpel, suggesting death during a procedure. A metal cart near the bodies held rusted syringes and a bloodied notebook titled Verhaltens Therapy Polar 5. Its contents included drawings of internal organs, scribbled calculations, and unnerving phrases. Subject did not respond to rapid cold exposure. Limb detachment after 12 minutes. Injection number 3 yielded aggression beyond expectation. Terminated. Memory loss achieved after second dose. Duration unclear. When translated and leaked to investigative journalists, the implications became clear. Schatzgräber wasn't just monitoring the weather. It was a lab for human experimentation in extreme environments. Evidence pointed to the use of Soviet POWs for tests in hypothermia, starvation, sensory deprivation, and chemical exposure. The treasures being hunted were not meteorological data, they were thresholds of human endurance and breaking points of the mind. But the most terrifying discovery was still to come. In a chamber marked with a faded skull symbol, the team found a sealed metal cylinder bolted into a frozen floor. When thawed and opened, it contained several samples of what appeared to be biological material. One labeled Iceblut serum. A second was marked Serum X, batch number 4, aggression. The Russian government swiftly removed the samples for study, citing national security. Independent scientists, however, released documents indicating the Nazis may have been attempting to develop biological agents capable of altering psychological states, rage induction, memory suppression, even emotion regulation, via injections. Though dismissed as science fiction by mainstream scholars, the evidence inside Sectors VI offered a compelling and disturbing counter-narrative. And then the incidents began. 2 Russian researchers involved in the recovery reported severe hallucinations, paranoia, and insomnia after handling the files and canisters. One suffered a psychotic break during a televised panel discussion, screaming about eyes in the snow and the voices from below. Another vanished after returning to the site in early winter. His last transmission, picked up by satellite, simply said, "They're not gone." Satellite footage from that period showed strange heat signatures in the bunker zone, despite the temperature being -40 degrees Celsius. Theories exploded online. Some claimed the Nazis had been experimenting with creating cold-resistant super soldiers. Others believed they had found something ancient in the Arctic, something they failed to control. Adding fuel to the fire, a German document discovered in 2020 mentioned an internal SS program called Nordliebe, a bioweapon initiative focusing on geo-conditioned mental reprogramming. The program was terminated without explanation. Its final note read, "Arctic results, undeterminable. Isolation protocol activated. No return." Locals in Franz Josef Land, though few and far between, have long told tales of white shadows roaming the ice, figures glimpsed in the distance that vanish when approached. Some say they're just polar bears. Others whisper of something colder, crafted by cruel hands in a forgotten war, still lingering beneath the snow. The Russian government has since sealed off the island, establishing a permanent military outpost under the guise of strategic security. The Schatzgräber entrance was reburied, and all data from the expedition was classified. Still, leaks continue. Footage exists, though difficult to verify, of one soldier breaking down in tears after entering Sectors VI. His voice can be heard, trembling. They weren't testing for war. They were testing for something else. Something not human. Whether the story is an exaggerated legend or an uncovered horror is unknown. But one thing is certain, in the frozen void of Alexandra Land, the echoes of Nazi science still drift in the cold, waiting to be disturbed again. In the dense, shadowed expanse of the Thuringian forest lies a place where the ground hides more than soil and stone. Locals speak of strange tremors, unmarked military trucks, and whispers in the night. The forest is home to the infamous Jonas-Tal tunnels, a sprawling subterranean system shrouded in mystery. Built under the brutal force of slave labor during the final years of World War II, the tunnels were never completed. Yet to this day, no one truly knows what was meant to lie beneath. Officially, the Jonas-Tal tunnels were part of Project S3, a Nazi plan to create a new Führer headquarters as Berlin crumbled. But declassified American intelligence reports from the 1950s and recent geophysical surveys suggest that the scale of the project far exceeded mere bunkers. Rumors persist of secret chambers sealed behind blast doors, a hidden vault deep underground, and even nuclear experimentation. In 2019, a German-Belgian archaeological team gained rare permission to conduct a private exploration of a long-abandoned section of the Jonas-Tal system. Using magnetometry and advanced sonar, they discovered an anomaly, a massive metallic structure buried beneath layers of rubble and earth. The readings suggested a sealed chamber roughly 20 meters wide, protected by a reinforced titanium alloy door. No such room appeared on any wartime schematic. After weeks of careful excavation, the team unearthed what would come to be known as the Inferno Vault. The vault door was unlike anything the researchers had seen. It bore no markings, only a scorched symbol crudely etched into its surface, a circle within a triangle, pierced by a downward-facing lightning bolt. It took hydraulic tools nearly 17 hours to break through the outer seals. Inside, the air was dry, preserved by vacuum conditions. What they found was chilling. The chamber was circular and lined with polished steel panels, some scorched, others warped. The floor was coated with ash. A central podium stood in the middle, topped with a shattered glass dome. Beneath it were wires, a small generator, and broken fragments of uranium-238 rods. Against the far wall lay two skeletons, charred, fused with the metal surface. Nearby, they found binders of technical documentation labeled Sonderprojekt Thule Electra. The documents detailed an experimental energy weapon, rumored to be a focused plasma emitter, drawing power from unstable nuclear reactions. The files referenced a failed live test in March 1945, one that caused a blast so intense it incinerated all test subjects and scorched the chamber walls. Strangely, the blast left no structural damage to the tunnel walls beyond the chamber itself, indicating the weapon was somehow self-contained, or the explosion deliberately suppressed. Among the scattered notes was one passage written in pencil, frantic and nearly illegible. "We opened something," it screamed. "Not ready. Not meant for this world. Do not rebuild. Do not return." This scribbled note sent waves through the academic community. The official stance of the German government was to discredit the team's findings, calling them misinterpreted relics and wartime hysteria. Yet photos leaked by a whistleblower showed symbols etched into the walls, runes associated with occult practices, similar to those found at Weilsburg Castle. Some researchers began to speculate that the Inferno vault was not merely a weapons test site but part of a hybrid experiment, merging technology with occult philosophy. A recovered tape, its label singed off, contained audio logs of scientists discussing energy resonance patterns, quantum breaches, and something called Die Rote Welle, the red wave. As the team delved deeper into the vault, strange things began to occur. One researcher suffered severe burns without any heat source present. Another collapsed after reporting an ear-splitting hum coming from the walls, audible only to him. Electromagnetic readings inside the chamber fluctuated violently, despite the generators being off. Worse still, their cameras captured fleeting glimpses of movement. Shadows that didn't belong to anyone in the room. A reflection in a steel panel that turned to face the camera, even though no one stood near it. After 2 weeks, the project was abruptly shut down. Military personnel arrived unannounced and escorted the team off-site. The chamber was resealed, and all artifacts confiscated. The official reason given, unexploded ordnance risk. But insiders later revealed that private communications among the military command described the vault as high-risk anomalous, and that containment protocols had been activated. Some claimed the Inferno vault was connected to Die Glock, the bell, another Nazi superweapon steeped in myth. Others argued it was a standalone project, a last, desperate attempt by Hitler's inner circle to create a final miracle, something so destructive it could reverse the tide of war. Whether a failed weapon or a gateway to something beyond understanding, the Inferno vault was evidence of how far the Third Reich was willing to go. Jonastal has since become a restricted zone. Armed guards now patrol key entry points. Drone footage shows new excavation equipment operating at night. What they're searching for, or what they're trying to bury, remains unclear. Whispers among those who once stepped foot inside the vault speak of visions. One researcher now institutionalized claims he still hears a low hum in his dreams, accompanied by a red light that burns behind his eyelids. He mutters one phrase over and over, "The machine is still warm." To this day, the Thuringian forest sleeps atop its buried metal heart. Whether it still beats or waits to be awakened is a question no one dares ask aloud. Hidden beneath the ominous stones of Weilsburg Castle lies a bunker that even the most seasoned historians hesitate to speak of. The castle, once the ideological center of Heinrich Himmler's SS, is infamous for its black sun mosaic and arcane architecture. But few know of the forbidden chamber that rests deep under its foundations, sealed behind iron doors and occult sigils, what some call the Puppeteer's bunker. Construction on Weilsburg began in the early 17th century, but it wasn't until the 1930s that it took on its darkest form. Himmler, obsessed with mysticism, Germanic mythology, and Aryan superiority, envisioned the castle as the spiritual heart of a thousand-year Reich. He oversaw renovations that added secret libraries, cryptic symbols, and even ceremonial chambers. Yet one element remained off the books, an underground lab constructed under the guise of military communication storage, known only to a handful of SS insiders. In 2001, following minor earthquakes that destabilized part of the hill below the castle. A collapse revealed a forgotten stairwell buried behind reinforced concrete. The local government, hoping to restore the damaged portions for tourism, sent an archaeological team to investigate. What they found led to the site being closed indefinitely. The stairwell descended into darkness, winding down farther than expected, at least 4 levels below what had been recorded on architectural plans. At the bottom was a steel vault door with a shattered locking mechanism, blown from the inside. Beyond it stretched a corridor lined with empty niches, each marked by strange runes carved in alternating patterns. At the end, a rounded chamber opened into view, unlike anything seen in traditional German military bunkers. The walls were covered with mirrors, many cracked or fogged. A large circular table sat in the center, made of a black obsidian-like material. Around it stood 7 high-backed chairs, each adorned with a different symbol: a wolf, a flame, a serpent, a skull, an eye, a crescent, and a wheel. Upon closer inspection, the backs of the chairs bore dried stains. DNA testing later confirmed it as human blood. A rusted reel-to-reel recorder in the corner still held tape. After cleaning and digital recovery, chilling audio emerged. In a grainy male voice, someone chants in German, pausing every few lines. A chorus of others responds. The phrases, when translated, form a ritual invoking obedience without mind, movement without soul. The voice grows distorted toward the end, interrupted by static and a high-pitched keening. Then, silence, broken by soft, rhythmic tapping. A side chamber revealed a more disturbing scene. Behind a glass wall stood 6 mannequins, or what were believed to be mannequins, each positioned like puppets on strings. But closer inspection revealed human remains, bodies dried and preserved, muscles locked in contorted postures. Hooks embedded in their joints ran to pulleys and levers mounted on the ceiling. The room was labeled simply, Der Marionettensal, the puppet hall. Tubes connected to the back of each body, feeding into a central engine-like device that pulsed faintly, despite decades of disuse. The machine's design was bizarre. Copper coils wrapped in organic material, dials inscribed with non-standard symbols, and a massive crank that bore the inscription, Free durch Ordnung, free through order. An adjacent desk held Himmler's personal stationery and a typewritten document labeled Phase 3, Corpor Projection. It outlined a program focused on breaking the human will entirely, not through pain, but through ritual, hypnosis, and pharmacological conditioning. The goal, to create empty vessels that could be controlled remotely or by suggestion, responding to light, sound, and even gesture commands. Essentially, human beings stripped of thought and self, flesh puppets. The report referenced experiments in other sites, including concentration camps, but noted best results achieved at Wheelsburg. One line, scrawled in pen in the margins, simply read, "The eye responds. We are close." Rumors swirled that this eye was more than a metaphor. Beneath the chamber was a small circular room, walls smooth and featureless except for a single bronze sculpture, an eye with a vertical pupil, fixed in a stare. Lights flickered constantly in its presence, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees compared to the rest of the complex. Equipment left in the room often failed, and several researchers complained of nausea and vertigo. A psychologist on the team experienced a full mental breakdown after staying in the eye room alone for just 17 minutes. He claimed he saw the mannequins move, twitching against their restraints, and that a voice whispered to him in perfect Latin, "You do not command, you receive." His notes, found later, contained strange symbols drawn obsessively. When compared to ancient Nordic runes and Enochian angelic script, patterns emerged, suggesting a blend of linguistic systems never before seen together. The implication was disturbing, that the SS may have been attempting to create a new, universal language, not for communication, but control. The German government quickly intervened. The site was sealed once more, and all documents seized. But whispers escaped. Former staff and researchers spoke anonymously of experiments continuing in secret, possibly under the patronage of modern intelligence agencies. One even claimed that remnants of the technology were smuggled to South America after the war, forming the basis for psychological warfare techniques used decades later. Today, Tourists may visit the upper halls of Wheelsburg Castle and marvel at its dark elegance. They walk across the black sun floor, unaware of what lies beneath. The Puppeteer's bunker remains off-limits, encased in darkness and dust. But those who've seen its contents know the truth. It was never just about ideology or war. It was about control. The breaking of minds, the erasure of self, and the creation of human tools shaped by occult science. What was started in that chamber may never have ended. Beneath the quiet city of Linz, Austria, birthplace of Adolf Hitler, lies a forgotten maze of tunnels. Originally constructed as wartime air raid shelters and supply routes, these underground passages were later expanded by the Nazis into a clandestine vault for priceless art stolen from across Europe. But deep below the public records and behind a wall of erased history, a sinister project unfolded, one that fused aesthetics, cruelty, and psychological torment in a way even the most depraved dictators rarely dared to imagine. In 1944, as Allied forces closed in on Germany, Hitler's obsession with Linz intensified. He envisioned it as the cultural crown jewel of the Third Reich, a metropolis filled with marble galleries, museums, and grand theaters. The Führer Museum, a massive museum project that would house the spoils of Europe's greatest collections, was never completed. But the artwork intended for it had to be hidden. Thousands of pieces, from Da Vinci to Rembrandt, were secretly transported into a reinforced bunker complex beneath the city's foundations. In 2021, a collapse in Linz's old town during a construction project exposed a sealed shaft. At first assumed to be another wartime tunnel, what lay beneath revealed something far more disturbing. Austrian historians and forensic specialists entered a narrow staircase leading down to a series of arched corridors. Behind a reinforced iron gate marked G2, Nur auf Befehl des Führers, only by order of the Führer, they found the remains of an underground gallery, but not of fine art. This gallery contained hundreds of grotesque paintings, many unsigned, some smeared with blood or bodily fluids. Faces were distorted, melting, screaming, eyeless. Figures in Nazi uniforms towered over skeletal forms, some cradling twisted infants, others holding tools of torture rendered in photorealistic detail. One wall was covered with a mural stretching nearly 20 meters, depicting a mass of blindfolded figures marching into the mouth of a gigantic skull-shaped mountain. Some of the works appeared to be copied from real events, scenes of mass executions, experiments, and torture chambers, yet with a surreal, theatrical flair. Attached to the paintings were handwritten labels, describing them as visual test subjects and morale disintegration instruments. In a hidden chamber, behind a wall of stacked crates containing stolen sculptures, researchers uncovered what is now referred to as Camera 13, Chamber 13. It was lined with soundproofing foam and equipped with projectors, speakers, and a raised viewing platform with restraints for one individual. The control station bore the name Operative Einheit-Kirche, Cherry Unit, and housed hundreds of film reels, labeled with names like Lichterfall, Form 1, and Kinderschrei 8. These reels, when reviewed in controlled conditions, revealed chilling contents. Victims strapped into chairs and subjected to audio-visual bombardment using flashing abstract patterns, violent imagery, and distorted classical music. The apparent goal was to psychologically unmake them. Documents recovered from a nearby filing cabinet confirmed it. The project was titled Project Euphonia, a classified initiative aimed at weaponizing art, light, and sound to break the human mind. A particularly disturbing file outlined something called the reflected agony hypothesis. According to the theory, individuals exposed to prolonged periods of hyperdistorted artistic imagery, paintings twisted into the grotesque, music corrupted into madness, would experience loss of identity, hallucinations, and ultimately develop acute aesthetic terror. The project proposed that if soldiers, prisoners, or even enemy leaders could be subjected to these methods, they could be rendered useless or driven to suicide. But this wasn't just theory. Within the bowels of the labyrinth, researchers found prison cells. Each was painted differently, some with spiraling, mind-bending patterns, others with monstrous murals. Lights in the ceilings flickered at calculated intervals. Audio played in loops, voices speaking nonsense, operatic shrieks slowed to unnatural speeds, or recordings of sobbing that never ended. Chains remained bolted to the floor. Dried blood stained the edges. Most horrifying of all was the discovery of journals belonging to a man known only as R.L. Dozens of entries were scrawled in multiple languages, as though the writer's mind unraveled into fragments. One entry read, "They paint with pain. They mold fear like clay. They want to create the new man, not pure, but hollow. I saw the sun scream in blue. I saw God's eye blink in red." Another entry ends abruptly after the sentence, "If you stare too long, it comes out of the frame." Investigators believe R.L. was a test subject, perhaps once an artist himself. Some speculate he may have been forced to contribute to the horrific artworks found in the gallery, part of a program that weaponized creative minds through coercion and madness. Many of the bodies found in the bunker were never identified. Some were locked in isolation cells surrounded by mirrors, others left in fetal positions before paintings that pulsed under strobe lights. Their causes of death varied: heart failure, dehydration, suicide, but all had one thing in common: their faces were frozen in expressions of terror. Today, Chamber 13 remains sealed under Austrian federal order. Portions of the tunnel complex have been bricked up, and the art is stored in classified archives. Rumors persist that private contractors working near the site have experienced vivid nightmares, hallucinations, and even personality changes after exposure. What was attempted under Linz wasn't just the hoarding of Europe's cultural treasures, it was the calculated perversion of art itself. Hitler, once a failed artist, may have seen in these chambers a final twisted revenge, the transformation of beauty into agony, and inspiration into suffering. It was a theater of horror, crafted by human hands, brushstrokes, and screams, a place where art did not imitate life, but desecrated it. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?